Trustworthy. Cool. Is there a way to see who's backlinking to my website? Yeah, so there are tons of ways. You can actually also use Google Search Console to achieve that. And then there are other tools that I will talk about a bit later that you can use. So SEO metrics. So I think one of the most important things is to think about, there was a great advertiser, and I forgot his name, but he said 50%, I waste 50% of my ad spend, but I can't tell which 50%. And the reason is that when he said that, analytics wasn't as advanced as it is today. And there's no point doing any SEO activities if you're not going to measure them. Because if you are working on your SEO, but you're not measuring how that progresses or how that impacts your website, then you're not going to know if any of these worked or not. So here are some important factors or like metrics that you might want to review. You can review most of these in Google Analytics, but you can also review a lot of them in other tools like SEMrush and Ahrefs. I could do a whole talk on metrics and watching them because I would say analytics is an incredibly valuable, very underrated and underappreciated area. But what I would recommend that you do is keep an eye on your basic metrics and then expand your knowledge of how these metrics work. So as a really quick description of these metrics, total clicks, that's simply a case of how many people click from Google or search engine onto your website. Core web vitals, so these are certain metrics that Google released, I think last week, that say, are these factors are relevant to your website, how are you performing? So for example, there's like web speed, I think there's also content quality and a few other things. It was just very recently released. You can access it in Google Search Console. Referring domains, that's how many websites link back to you, not just the individual links. Organic traffic is all the traffic that comes to your website that isn't paid. John Wanamaker, interesting. User experience metrics. So this is simply a case of any metrics that affect how a user understands your website. So that might be something like how long someone spends on your website. We call that dwell time. Or that might be how many pages a person visits. Or how many people bounce, which is when someone visits your website and then immediately leaves because they're not finding what they're looking for. Then also traffic cost. This is basically, if I paid for this, how much would that cost me? Index pages, which is simply a case of how many pages does Google have of my website, which you again can access from Google Search Console. Average CTR, so this is how many people view your, when you search something like water pistol, CTR is conversion rate, and it looks at how many times a link appears and then how many times someone clicks on it. So if someone's only clicking on your link 0.001 times, then it probably means it's not going to be relevant for them. But if someone's clicking 50% of the time, then it probably means you've got a highly relevant link. And now I really want a water pistol. Keyword rankings, that's simply a case of how high your website ranks for certain keywords. And coverage errors, which is, are there any parts of your website that aren't being indexed properly? A fun way to look at this is you can go to Google, type site, and then type in your domain. And you can then see all the pages that Google has of you. My website's very new, so not many. And in fact, Google is telling me to look at Google Search Console as well there. So I would recommend that you you create one. But it's a fun way to see all the different pages that a website has, that Google has of you. And you can also do this for competitors, which is quite fun. So for example, one of my competitors is called Ladder. They're frankly amazing. But then what you can do is you can see how they've created their website. And you can see all the different pages. So this is every article of theirs. So that's site, colon, and then domain. There's a bunch of Google search functionality that you can use. I would recommend Googling it because there is a touch more, there's a bunch more that I've forgotten off the top of my head. SERPs. So a very commonly used term is search engine results page, which actually confused me for a really long time before I realized it was simply this bit of the page. So it's just where the results are. But what you'll find is that this will be mentioned a lot, and yeah, it's simply the results that appear. Okay, so keyword strategies.